So just before we went to the break, my colleague Tsahoacho Mwaki trying to press the Education Department in terms of what to expect come Thursday when the matric results are coming out. Whether it looks good, Elijah Mhlanga kindly denying the request to comment. And keeping with that theme, this year marks 70 years since the introduction of Bantu education in South Africa, a system dismantled on paper but which still exists in our education system. That's according to Mmusi Maimane, Build One South Africa leader. He is suggesting a few paradigm shifts, though. Let's speak to him for more on this. Build One South Africa leader Mmusi Maimane is on our video link. Thank you very much, sir, for availing yourself this afternoon. Perhaps let's start with the brief history lesson. What was the premise of Bantu education?
Good afternoon, and to all our fellow South Africans, wish them a great year. And to the matriculants, when the results get given finally, I hope those who succeed do well. But let's not be under any illusions that our education system is failing. Those issues that sit at the core of what's wrong with Bantu education is the fact that it believed that young, particularly black kids, would amount to nothing. And therefore, what was the point of educating them in mathematics and science? As Hendrik Verwoerd so profoundly put it, to say, actually, you don't want to educate the Bantu past their station. Today, the conditions and the circumstances of your birth still determine what kind of education you are. If you live in a poor community, you will get access to a school. But because you have to pass at 30%, that education will render you not only unemployed, but unemployable. And so on that premise, it presumes the fact that young people and children have no potential. As the apartheid government believed that children had no potential, black kids couldn't be scientists, couldn't be doctors. I fear that this government is educating in such a way that it genuinely cannot convince anyone that it believes our kids are able to achieve 50%, become scientists, become doctors. And so we have to work harder at producing an education system that prepares our children for a future that is coming.
What evidence is there, sir, to suggest that this 30% pass rate you speak of will render people unemployed will render them unemployed or unemployable?
Well, first and foremost, 3/4 of young people in this country face unemployment. So of all those who pass this year, 3/4 of them will end up in the streets next year. So that's the first piece of evidence you've got to look at. The second is, you and I know very well, we'd never go to a doctor who only knows 30% of the work. And we'd never fly a plane flown by a pilot who only knew 30% of flying. So if we wouldn't do that and skills like that, why are we asking our young people to pass at 30%? But furthermore, the clear evidence is actually articulated in the fact that once you increase the pass rate to 50%, only 23% of children in this country pass at that level. So it's common cause that, in fact, had it not been for the 30% that the government has, we would have a far more sobering matric pass rate, and it would be an indicator of what our education system genuinely delivers.
Is it fair to squarely put this at the Department of Education's door? I ask that perhaps to your contention that about 30% of the children that actually make it through school will be unemployed next year. This year, can we not also, or is there something to be said about the economic setup of South Africa that enables this kind of thing to go on, where you do find graduates who have made it with good grades and yet they sit unemployed in 2023?
Sure. Well, I think that's an important question to put forward. The first thing is that we know unemployment amongst graduates is far lower. It sits below 10%. So clearly the problem is about making sure that the skills pipeline can deliver a place where young people are able to get through and get at least a bachelor's pass so that they can compete. Secondly, we also know that the more skilled a person is, the better they are at being able to find work. And that is evidenced by the fact that you are able to put your skills on the market. What was very clear, we are losing CAs, we are losing teachers, we are losing the number of doctors in society, mainly because we just don't have the skills pipeline to be able to fulfill that. So I'm not here to argue that there are more than enough jobs. I'm realistic enough to know that against low economic growth, you are going to struggle to produce the requisite jobs. But I also want to highlight that countries that have made it, Japan, South Korea, and so many others, have done so on the back of sending their kids to be educated at best. Because once you've got kids that are educated and are skilled, they are innovative, they are entrepreneurial, and they can compete anywhere else in the world. Our kids are being set up for failure. And I think, to me, that is economic sabotage. And against the background of a government that can't keep the lights on, doesn't really have a macroeconomic vision. It means that the circumstances that existed pre-1994 for particularly black children are still very evident today.
What lessons can we learn from countries on the continent? Maybe I think of our neighbors in Zimbabwe. They once had a very thriving education system at a point in time in history, right? Today you can argue otherwise somewhat. So what is it that we can learn from our peers from the rest of the continent?
Well, I think to your last session, even still today, when you put up countries in Africa, Kenya and so forth, the education systems and their output upon assessment are better than ours, mainly because they've depoliticized the schooling system by de-unionizing it. This is about appointing the best leaders in the school. That's the first lesson we've got to learn. There's a report that Mmusi herself requested. There is a jobs for cash report that showed the fact that principals were being chosen by unions, not because they knew what was going on in the school, but because they were aligned to a particular union. So we've got to de-unionize that space. Secondly, we've got to make sure the best teachers stay in school and reward them accordingly. Most teachers that sometimes we've got in our education system come from an old paradigm of teaching, and so they themselves have never seen a good lesson being presented. We've got to train up our teachers. And then thirdly, we've got to ask for parents to be involved. There's clear evidence that shows that when a community is engaged in a schooling system, it helps the school stay intact. So I can almost, by flying a helicopter over schools, look at the best kept schools where parents are involved, and I can tell you the pass rate there will be higher. And then lastly, we've got to fix the infrastructural backlog. Why should it be that in 2023, children are studying in schools with pit latrines, and as I saw in the news the other day, schools that were burnt down, now kids have to sit in classrooms of 70, etc., and not be able to get the attention they need. The paradigm I'm proposing is that we build charter schools so that there's a combination of public and private, and then we empower parents by giving them vouchers where they can choose where their children can go to. Because once you have a choice and you can exercise that choice, believe you me, the school is forced to compete but to improve its standards equally so.
Yeah, how do we understand that, right? With what the department makes us understand is that right now they will be sitting with a backlog where some children have not been placed, because parents do have a choice as to where to send their schools, but you find that certain schools, they are so full that they then have to move their kids further away. It is something that you perhaps touch on when you speak of Bantu education, that after the dawn of democracy, the ruling party did little to dismantle the system. So systematically, what can be done? Because you also speak of this quintile system.
I speak also of charter schools. The government has already got the land, it's got the teachers, and we spend just over 12,500 per child per year. So if we're able to partner with parents by giving them a voucher and partner with private institutions, I think we can roll out more schools in communities, and we can roll out the quality of the school. There should be no reason in 2023 that a child who studies in Dobsonville gets a lower education than a child who studies, for argument's sake, in Davidton or in another community. So we've got to ensure that those schools get the same and a fair education. This feeder area dilemma has created where in certain communities the schools are so poor that it forces the parents to apply at other schools where they hope for a better education. So in other provinces, you've got a different problem where certain schools are being closed because of the poor education that parents are exposed to. We've got to ensure that in those infrastructural spaces, we put the property out, we make sure there's a private-public partnership, and we ensure that we get the best education. I'm committed to that, and I'm seeing that there are programs that are being run, for argument's sake, as an innovative space. If we took some of the BBBEE spend and put it towards a charter school, could we not get better results in terms of redress and dismantling apartheid legacy than educating our children? I think we could achieve better outcomes.
Before we let you go, if I could perhaps get a thought from you that the President will be sitting in the dark with the rest of us instead of jetting off to Davos?
Well, I hope that he uses the time effectively, because it was last year he left Washington and then came back and nothing really happened. Instead, we've gotten worse. Now he's staying away from Davos. And I hope that the delegation that's going to Davos for South Africa is going to represent us well. But the president must now make decisive actions about how we're going to get out of load shedding, how we're going to ensure that this decision around 18% is reversed, and how we stimulate our economy to make sure that load shedding, as is already resulting in job shedding, is curbed. Now is the time to fight, and the people must take to the streets.
Build One South Africa leader Mmusi Maimane. Thank you.